Today I want to show you how to create a Pipedream workflow that runs every time a PagerDuty on-call schedule changes from one person to another. So what I've got here in PagerDuty is this test schedule where you can see every single hour it just rotates from one person to the next. So I expect a Pipedream workflow to run every single time that schedule changes and a new person comes on call. In this example, I'm just going to send a message to a Slack channel every time that happens, just as a end-to-end test. Back in Pipedream, if you don't yet have a Pipedream account, you can just click the Get Started button here to sign up. But I've signed up, and I'm going to go to the Sources section of the UI. Sources list what we call event sources. Event sources listen for new events from some source app like PagerDuty or GitHub, and then can emit an event each time an event happens in the source system. Those events in Pipedream can trigger workflows, which is how we automate things end to end. So every time the schedule changes, I want to run a Pipedream workflow. Every time I push a new GitHub PR, for example, I can also run a Pipedream workflow. If I click Create Source, I can see all of the apps for which we have sources. So first I will select PagerDuty, and then New On-Call Rotation as the specific event source. That's the event that I want to listen for. I'll connect my PagerDuty account, and if you don't yet have an account connected, I do here. You can click New. This would prompt you automatically if you didn't yet have an account, so you wouldn't have to click that New button. I'll click my test account. I'll authorize Pipedream's access, and now I'm prompted for a couple more things. So by default, this source will actually listen for any on-call rotations across escalation policies or schedules. So if I click Create Source Now, what this source does is every 10 minutes by default, it will pull the PagerDuty API to see if there's been a new schedule change. For this specific source, PagerDuty actually doesn't support webhook notifications, so that we can't trigger an on-call rotation notification in real time, okay? That's the case for many PagerDuty API events. They just don't happen to support it here. So the trigger is not instant, but you can modify this down to actually run once every 15 seconds. You may hit Pipedream limits, but if you do, just reach out to our Pipedream community and we can help raise your limits and work on options for you. Right now it runs every 10 minutes, which will still keep you well within the free tier. And every 10 minutes, the source will pull for new on-call rotations and emit a new event. I can also change this source to listen for any number of on-call rotations on specific escalation policies. If you're just interested in one or a handful of policies, again, I'm going to delete those just to look at changes to all policies across my account. I'll click Create Source. And what it's going to do initially is emit a couple of test events that just look at the state of my escalation policy schedule right now. So it tells me that a new person has come on call. Now, I've got a couple of different escalation policies in my account. So if I click on this first event, I can see that the event data that Pipedream emits contains information on the escalation policy and the user who rotated on call. Notice the ID here for this escalation policy. If I click on this other event, the reason we emitted two events, again, is because I have two separate escalation policies. Same person is on call in both these cases. This is just a test to show you how this works. So we see an event emitted now. How do we actually do things with that event? How do we automate this? Every time an on-call rotation happens, I want to do X. If I click on this Create Workflow button at the bottom here, I had to deselect the event, but I can click Create Workflow here. A Pipedream workflow is simply a set of linear steps that runs some code on a trigger step. So the trigger here is PagerDuty. We support triggers like HTTP endpoints, cron jobs, anything you can think of. Again, here I want to run this on new on-call rotations. My trigger step has been configured. And I mentioned that I want to send this to Slack. So I'm going to search Slack. I see I have all these pre-built actions here that Pipedream provides. I want to send a message to a channel. Similar to the PagerDuty source, I've got to click my Slack account, the text I want to send. This gets interesting, okay? This source displayed a test event, one of the events that I just showed you for an on-call rotation. So this is the format of the event that arrives in my workflow. Now, I have access to this event through the variable event that I can use in any steps. So the literal variable name event, if I start searching here, I can actually see that the text I want to pass can be a combination of variables from my trigger and just any raw text. Okay, this just accepts a string. So here, I just want to say that a specific person came on call. So I'm going to look first for the name of the user. And if I click select that path, it fills in that variable with this double curly brace syntax that will interpolate the value of that variable. So when I send the message to Slack, it should show me Mario Pipedream has come on call for escalation policy. And then here I'll grab the name of my escalation policy. So I've selected my text. The channel here is my PagerDuty test channel. Now I need to deploy my workflow to memorialize this change. If I click deploy, that will save my state. Deploys automatically save. And here I can send this test event through my workflow to see how it works. If I go back to Slack, Mario Pipedream has come on call for escalation policy, test escalation policy. Notice here at the top, we don't immediately activate your event source to trigger new events until you're done with your workflow. So for high volume event sources, this may be in an intermediate state while you're still building your workflow. We actually don't want to flood you with new messages immediately. So we turn the source off by default. So even if I get a new on-call rotation right now, it wouldn't trigger my workflow. To enable that, I'm going to select that. And now I'm good. If I want to take a look at the details of the source and look at that view we had when we first created the event source, I can click on this Edit Code and Configuration button. That gets me back to the source here. I can modify the details that I entered before when I created my source. So I can increase the frequency of the polling. I can change the escalation policies. And the cool thing is you actually have access to the source code for each one of these event sources. So you didn't have to write any code in this whole process, but if you wanted to modify how this source worked for a specific use case, it's actually just a Node.js module. And we document this on our GitHub repo, pipedreamhq/pipedream. You can get to that also on our community section here. Every single one of the components that you saw, the event sources that you saw listed when you created that source initially, they're all stored on our GitHub repo. So you can submit PRs, you can create new sources. The API is documented here. This is a little confusing for new users. We call event sources components because that's the name of the structure of the code, the Node.js module format that we use. In the abstract, those things are called components. If you come from Vue or React or other front-end frameworks, the notion of a component as just a collection of methods and data that can accept inputs, these should feel a little familiar. If you're not familiar with those systems, essentially, it's just a Node.js module that runs code on new incoming events. And that's exactly how we control the way that this happens here. Every 10 minutes, I pull the PagerDuty API. If a new person comes on call, only then do I emit a new event. And that event, again, triggers that workflow that I created. If I go back to workflows and select this one, I see this here. I'll finally just wrap this up by naming my workflow. Send a new Slack message when a user comes on call. Now, the other thing I'll mention, you can write any Node.js code you want in Pipedream workflows. We've packaged all these actions for common use cases, but the power of Pipedream lets you do anything you want with the incoming event data. So I can select that Run Node.js code step, and I can start to play around. If I just wanted to see what I could do, right, I could console.log just the value of event, which again is the event data that triggers my workflow. And if I send this test message now, it's going to send that message to Slack. But then if I wanted to do more work, here I see my console log, right? I could write any Node.js code I want. So we've got thousands of actions across 300 plus apps that you can choose from. And again, if you don't see the action you need, you want to do something custom, you can write your own. Take a look at our docs. Again, join our community if you have any questions. We live on Slack and GitHub discussions. And we're happy to build any more integrations or workflows that would help you. Take care.